Sorry, that thing froze again. I have to keep moving this. You think I bought a new, better computer that it would not do this, but the old one didn't. Anyway, so they were not the big name band that they would become a couple of years later yet. But this is their debut. This is their best album, in my opinion, my favorite album of theirs. And at this point, they're more raw, they're more rocking. They came out of the Paisley underground scene. They're more sort of 60s oriented and pop and fun oriented. Just a harmony laden, beautiful album. It's got really not a bad song on here. Here's the cover, of course. Here's the back cover, and I think I had the inner sleeve somewhere. Here's the inner sleeve of it, and there's a slinky on the other side. They're on the Columbia label, so they're on a major label. But so didn't chart, wasn't a big hit, but was a great album. I didn't have this on vinyl back then. I actually had it on cassette. I remember riding around in the car and us listening to this a lot. And three of the songs on here are among my favorite of their songs. Hero Takes a Fall, opening track. It's on a video on YouTube. You can look it up. Just a great, exploding, joyous pop rock song, upbeat, catchy as hell. Dover Beach is just beautiful. Another really good. Between those two, I'm not sure which is my favorite Bangles song, but both of them are tens. The world is no one's dream. That's one of the lines in Dover Beach, and that's definitely the case, unfortunately. This is another song on here is called More Than Meets the Eye, which is just this gorgeous, beautiful, harmony rich chamber pop little nugget of a song. Compare this to the song Eternal Flame from their 1988 album Everything, which I think was a #1 hit. That song, it's okay. It's just a sort of a slick little MTV pop song. It's not a terrible song, but very harmony laden, rich, great vocals in that song too. More Than Meets the Eye just wipes the floor with it. It's just way better, and this album is way better. They would go on, of course, in 1986 to release this album, which was a huge hit. The record label polished them up, made their sound slicker and more professional, dressed them up in nicer clothes and all that. This had the huge hits Manic Monday, which is an okay song. It's written by Prince. Walk Like an Egyptian was a huge hit. Never was, don't hate it, but never was crazy about it. And this album has some good stuff. I mean, In a Different Light, Walking Down Your Street, If She Knew What She Wants is a really good song. September Girl's a cover of a cover song of a Big Star song that they do really well. And it's a good album. It's slick. It's more polished. It's more professional. This one's looser, funkier, more rocking, more upbeat, more interesting, better songs. This is their best album by far from 1984. And they would go on to 88. They would have Everything, which had the Eternal Flame, and In Your Room, I think, was the really good song on that I liked. They did a cover of Hazy Shade of Winter for the movie Less Than Zero, the old Simon and Garfunkel song. I think that's one of the rare cases where a cover is actually better than the original, so I like that song. Not that the Simon and Garfunkel song version is really good too, but and then later on, years later, 88 was their last album of the 80s, and 203 they came out with Doll Revolution, and 2012, I believe it was, they came out with Sweetheart of the Sun, which is their final album so far. And those albums are more grown up. I mean, obviously, because now they're in their 40s instead of their 20s. More mature, grown up Bangles, and more folk rock, singer songwriter stuff. There's still some upbeat rock and roll numbers on them. The two reunion albums are actually really good, better than I expected them to be. And the albums after, all over the place, have their moments, but none of them have the magic and the wonder and the just beautiful vocals and 60s sounding but in an 80s way songs. This is just a sweet, beautiful, wonderful album and a treat. And if you didn't ever check this one out, if you only know the Bangles by the hits, definitely give this a check out. And if nothing else, go to YouTube, look up Hero Takes a Fall, look up Dover Beach, Dover Beach, look up More Than Meets the Eye, and you'll be in for something special. Really, really great band. So the Bangles, 1984 debut there, a wonderful thing. Let's see. Moving on here is this was kind of a comeback because they had their debut in '81. I think their follow-up second album, sophomore effort, in '82, and then they didn't kind of disappeared and came back in '84. Talk Show by the Go-Go's. And I saw the Bangles in concert, but it wasn't until '86. I didn't get to see them in '84. I did see the Go-Go's in '84 with Becky. I remember I bought her a Go-Go's t-shirt that was pink and said the Go-Go's on it, and she used to wear that. This is my favorite album of theirs. I remember back in '81 hearing Our Lips Are Sealed on the radio, and I liked it, thought it was good. Another girl named Lisa that I worked with liked it too, and she said, well, I just heard their new single that's even better. It's called We Got the Beat. I said, oh yeah, I need to check that, and I checked that out. I remember they used that in the 1982 film Fast Times at Ridgemont High in the opening of that movie, and need to do a video on my thoughts of that movie sometime, but another time we'll get into that. And then they kind of disappeared, and they came back with this, and I remember being in the TCU pub. First time I heard, I had MTV, that's a pub, bar across the street from Texas TCU, the college I went to in Fort Worth, and they played the video for Head Over Heels, and I fell head over heels for the video. I really liked the video, I really liked the song, so I went out and bought this Head Over Heels, Turn to You. It's got a song called Beneath the Blue Sky, which wasn't a single, but I think it's their most achingly beautiful, and I think it's their best song. It's my favorite song by the Go-Go's. Really love this album. It kind of didn't do as well. It got a lot of play. It did well, but it didn't do as well commercially as their first album. And I'm not even sure if it did as well as the second album, Vacation, which is a pretty solid album, but that's kind of forgotten and remembered only for the title track now. But I think those first two albums sold better and they were bigger. And of course, sadly, after this tour, the band broke up. They came back years, 15, 16 years later, did a reunion album, God Bless the Go-Go's. It's not very good. It's got it got like the guy from Green Day writing songs for them and stuff, and it's got maybe a couple of songs that are okay. The rest of it's just sort of filler. So it was a bad move for them to come back. Where the Bangles reunion albums are actually listenable and pretty darn good, but the Go-Go's, God Bless the Go-Go's, is not very good. And that's usually how it should be. I mean, I credit very few bands have the sense to know when to call it a day. You know, the Beatles and the Jam, they were at the top of their game, and they called it a day and broke up, and they never got back together, unless you want to count Free as a Bird and Real Love for the Beatles, which I'll be nice and not count those. But and I'm glad that the Beatles and the Jam never got back together. I was mad because I got into the Jam in 1982, and I bought I bought a couple of their albums, and was hoping that, because they had a new album they put out in 1982, I was hoping they would tour and I'd get to see them. And then they got some play on MTV with Town Called Malice, and with Bitterest Pill I Ever Had to Swallow. But then MTV, the news came that the Jam are going to break up, and they're doing a final tour, but they're only playing England, so I never got to see them. So I was unhappy about that, but in retrospect, I'm glad that Paul Weller never got them back together, and I'm glad the Beatles never got back together, because when you do, you get things like God Bless the Go-Go's that are just trying to force the issue. And because the thing is, these bands, whether it's the Beatles, the Jam, the Go-Go's, whatever good band, when they're new and fresh and when they're happening, if they're really good, it's organic, it's just happening naturally. And if they come back 10 years, 15 years after the fact, and 9 times out of 10 and try to do it again, they're trying to recreate something that used to be. They're trying to force the issue, and it just doesn't work. It's like I have great memories of high school. I'm not going to go to my old high school and ask the principal if I can sit in 10th grade class for a week to relive my high school experience, because that'd just be stupid and it wouldn't work. But this is the one that probably sold the least and got the least noticed, even though it did got quite a bit of airplay and was popular. I remember us playing this in the car. I had this on cassette. Got the CD years later. I didn't have the vinyl album of this either for some reason, because I usually bought vinyl albums of everything and a cassette too in a lot of cases to play in the car. But I remember this cassette getting a lot of play in the car. So the Go-Go's. Born in USA, Bruce Springsteen. And there's if you want to see a picture of Bruce's butt, there's the lyric sheet that came inside of it. And there's your inner sleeve. Springsteen, I guess, was really big on like the East Coast and the West Coast, maybe Chicago. He wasn't really all that big in Fort Worth, Dallas area. I remember Born in the USA, Born to Run, the song, and the album came out in '75 when I was like fifth grade, sixth grade. I remember hearing that song back then and thinking it was a pretty good song. I think I probably heard 10th Avenue Freeze Out. So I was aware of him. He got a little bit of radio play, but he wasn't a huge thing in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. He'd come play concerts. I guess people would come to see him. And I remember hearing a few songs from Darkness on the Edge of Town, which is, in my opinion, his best album, but not a whole lot of airplay for that. It probably got a lot of airplay otherwise. The first time I really got into him was when The River came out in 1980. Ties That Bind got quite a bit of airplay, radio play. So I bought that album, really was pleased with it, really liked Springsteen. Bought Nebraska in, what was that, 82, I think? 82 or 83 when that came out. A really good album that I appreciate more than I actually enjoy, even though I love the song Atlantic City, one of my favorite songs of his. Point is, I was a Springsteen fan before Born in the USA, and there were others in Fort Worth, but not a whole lot. Most people kind of knew who he was, and maybe knew Born to Run, the song. This album, of course, exploded and was the biggest selling album of his career, and took him to a whole different level of fame and stardom than he had before. In fact, I remember, I said, the girl that I was dating at the time, I always loved the song. I thought it was a lot of fun. Springsteen's, and a lot of people don't like it, but I love it, is Santa Claus Is Coming to Town, his Christmas song. And I had told her about that, and this was several months before Born in the USA got released. She heard it, and she was like, yeah, well, the less said about that, the better. So then this came out, and I remember the first week or so, because myself and some other friends of mine that were Springsteen fans were excited about the album and that he was touring and coming. And then because of MTV and radio play, within like a week or two, the thing just exploded, and all of a sudden everybody, and I was working at a movie theater at the time, I working that movie theater my last 2 years of high school and the first couple of years of college, and I was in college by this time. And just everybody was into Bruce and Springsteen, including Becky. She was all excited about him, wanted this album, wanted to go see him in concert, wanted to hear the earlier albums all of a sudden. A lot of people, especially the hardcore Bruce fans that were around before this came out, called this his sellout album, that Bruce worked out on Nautilus and got in shape and wrote these slick radio-friendly hits, because there are, I don't know how many, there were like 5 or 6 of these released as singles off this album. And yeah, there's some truth to that. But at the same time, this is a really great album. I think it's not as good as The River, Born to Run, or Darkness on the Edge of Town, but it's not too far below them either, in my opinion. And it's slicker, it's more commercial, it's more radio-friendly hits. But I think the only 2 dogs on here, and I do the lyrics, the sentiments certainly ring true, but the only 2 songs I really never liked on here are Glory Days in My Hometown. The rest, everything else is good to gold, in my opinion. I remember when I first got this, and I got it right when it came out, it took a few spins to sort of sink in. I kind of didn't know what to make of it right away, whereas The River I got into right away. And when I backtracked from buying The River and got Darkness and Born to Run, I got into those right away. So this took a few to get into, like Cover Me, and to get into Dancing in the Dark, which was the first single released from this, and the video, of course. But I grew to love those songs. But then some of these hit me right off. Bobby Jean, which, again, the girl I was dating at the time, we had our songs, and that was one of them. But No Surrender, Downbound Train, I'm on Fire, Darlington County, Working on the Highway, was just okay. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a good, solid album. And I think the funny thing about all these albums, all these bands I'm talking about, was these are, in my opinion, the last, I'm not going to say good, but the last great albums that any of these people made, because the Bangles, while their subsequent albums had their moments, their first album is way better than any of those. Springsteen, you know, after this he released that 5-album live set that sold a ton, basically based on the legs of Born in the USA. And then a couple of 2 or 3 years later, he released his follow-up studio album, Tunnel of Love, which I love the title track, a classic song. The rest of the album's okay to filler. And the Springsteen albums after that, and the rest of them in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, I've listened to some, and they just don't move me. A song or two here or there, maybe, but the Bangles, like I said, their follow-up stuff wasn't as good. Husker Du's follow-up stuff wasn't as good. The Go-Go's broke up, so there wasn't really any follow-up until their reunion album 15 years later, which wasn't very good. And it's also the case, sort of, with this last person I'm going to show, but this, yeah, I mean, all these albums, especially Born in the USA and the one I'm about to show, I just remember us playing it, driving around in our cars, playing the cassette. You'd hear other people coming out of their cars. These albums, these songs were just everywhere. And it's funny because back in the day, not just 84, but before that, with the Beatles, obviously, but the Kinks, the Who, I mean, the Who Live at Leeds, oh my God, London Calling by the Clash, and just so many other albums I can remember. I remember the one, because I was young, so I didn't have a ton of money to spend on albums, so I got albums as I could, but I would get albums, the Jam sound effects. I mean, good Lord, it's, you know, you'd get albums and you would just fall in love with the album, and you would just play the thing, just wear out the grooves on it, and just play it over and over, and you get to know it like the back of your hand. And then you immediately knew that this album was an old friend, and it was going to be a friend to you for the rest of your life. And I still love and adore and play those albums. And that was the case with this. That was the case with the next album. It was the case with the Bangles and the Go-Go's album. Maybe not so much the Husker Du album, because I haven't played that forever. But and I was trying to think back when the last time an album did that to me, and I really can't think of any past 1984. I can think of some albums that I liked quite a bit after 84, but I think USA, the Bangles, the Go-Go's, and this next one coming up are probably the last time I did that, when I had an album that I just played. And these albums had legs. I mean, these albums, especially Born in the USA and this one coming up, that they released multiple singles off of it, and they were still getting radio play and singles released into 1985, and just huge albums and all. So, and I remember Wedgwood was a funny job because it was a movie theater, it was minimum wage, it was tearing tickets and selling popcorn and candy, so it wasn't anything, you know, intellectually stimulating or challenging about the job per se. But we also had some other movie theaters in our chain of theaters that were owned by the same company, and at those theaters, the kids kind of just came and went. You know, you'd work there for 3 months, 6 months, or whatever, and then go get another minimum wage job down the street at a fast food or department store or something else, and but for some reason Wedgwood Theater, and we've talked about this, the girl and I and other employees that we work with there. There's something about that place because everybody that worked there, 90% stayed there for like 2, 3, 4 years. We all ran around together. We used to have these great employee parties because the movie wouldn't get out till midnight. We wouldn't all have to stay that late, but those employee parties wouldn't even get going till 10:30, 11, 12 o'clock at night, and then they'd go till 3 or 4 in the morning. I wish I still had the energy to do stuff like that, but everybody dated everybody. We called it the Wedgwood Soap Opera. It just had a feeling that you're going to know each other forever and be friends forever, and just a great time to be alive. And this music was the stuff that was playing, you know, and the other stuff like the Cars and Duran Duran, and then older stuff like Beatles and Rolling Stones and the Jam and the Clash and so forth. But I mean, just the soundtrack of having fun and being young and glad to be alive at the theater, at those parties and all that, and just those great memories. And that's why when I hear that stuff, it just takes me back right away. Purple Rain. So I knew about Prince. 1981, when I was in high school, I had to class where we had to go to a business and interview them and come back and give a report. And they grouped us into groups of like 4 or 5 students, and you know, this group of 4 goes to this business, this group to the other business. And this black guy in class said, "Hey, you know, just get a ride with me." Sure thing. And so he was playing a cassette, had this song called Controversy. I had no idea who Prince was, and this was because I guess back in the 60s, white kids and black kids listened to white and black music. You know, you had Motown and Otis Redding, and then Beatles and Rolling Stones and stuff, and there was a lot of crossover. In the 70s, that sort of unfortunately went away to a point. I mean, the people like Stevie Wonder and some others still had hits that, you know, were black and white people both got into. But and then I remember a buddy of mine in grade school who his favorite band was Led Zeppelin. So, you know, you got that. But a lot of the music that the black kids were listening to, the white kids weren't really paying attention to or aware of, and vice versa with what the white kids were listening to. So he was playing this cassette, and it was the album Controversy, and it was a title track. And I said, "Man, this is a cool song. What is this?" And he said, "Oh, this is the Prince, and this is a song called Controversy." And I said, "Well, since this guy, has he been around for a while?" And he said, "No, this is like his 3rd album or whatever." And I said, "That guy's good, man. I think that guy's going to be big among like everybody, black kids, white kids, whatever." And he wasn't so sure about that. This guy was saying, "I don't know about that," but anyway, and I actually meant to go buy the thing, but then I forgot the name of the song and the guy. So a year or so later, 1982, Prince starts showing up on MTV with Little Red Corvette, 1999. Great stuff. Talking about those employee parties, this guy named Hal, we used to have a lot of those parties at his house because his parents were out of town a bunch. And so parties would get started, like I said, around 10:30 or so. And if you worked at the theater, if you were the doorman that had to close, you didn't get out till midnight, 11:30 or midnight when the movies got out. And a lot of times that would be me. Sometimes it'd be the other guys. But I remember one of those parties I went to, and so, you know, the party started about 10:30, and I didn't get out. I had to work, didn't get out till midnight, ran home, changed clothes, ran over to Hal's house. So by this time, everybody from the theater and everybody else that's there, they've been drinking and everything since 10 o'clock, 10:30, and they're, you know, and I walk in totally, like, "Hey, everybody, how's it going?" One girl, Lee, comes flying across and tackles me, and Hal's dancing around with a tie, a necktie, tied around his head. And because for some reason the song 1999 is on MTV, and he thinks wearing a tie on his head, he's really drunk, thinks that makes him look like Prince or sing like Prince, which it did neither, but it was fun. And so I drank a bunch of beer, and before I know it, we're all dancing around singing Prince and all. But So 1999, a big album. I didn't buy the album at the time, even though I liked the songs. Um, Delirious, Little Red Corvette in 1999 that got airplay. So then Purple Rain, heard the song When Doves Cry, which I guess was released before the album and the movie, the lead single. Liked it, thought it was a good single, really liked it. I thought, the movie sounds interesting. I read a review of it, I think in Rolling Stone beforehand, before the movie was released, that said it's the best rock and roll movie since A Hard Day's Night. Okay, well, I'll go see this. I didn't work Fridays, so I went to Seminary South movie theater Friday, the first show, which was like the 12:30 show. And I remember there was a sign on there that said no one under 17 will be admitted to this movie, which they usually didn't put up for rated R movies, but I guess they did because they knew Prince was, popular, and there were going to be a lot of kids that wanted to see it. But the movie, first show, noon show, I don't know if it's sold out, but it was full house, and great experience. It was just me by myself because other people were at work and or weren't around, so I just went by myself. Had not heard anything but When Doves Cry. The movie opens with Let's Go Crazy, just sitting in my seat, just blew me away. And then the other performances, Darling Nikki, where that line about met her in a hotel lobby masturbating with a magazine, and kind of the whole theater's like, "Oh, what'd he say?" And just loved all the songs in it. Went straight from the movie to Sound Warehouse, bought this on vinyl, which I no longer have anymore. Came home and just sat there and listened to it all day. And then a buddy of mine from next door, the one I talked about in the Rolling Stones reviews, John, he got home from work about 5 or 6, and I said, "Man, we gotta go see this movie again." So him and I and his brother, we went and saw the 7 o'clock show, same place that night. It was sold out, but we got in, and he was, looking back on it, the movie is a pretty cliche story, not the greatest movie. The acting is pretty wooden and atrocious by everyone involved, with the exception of Morris Day, who's pretty natural in front of the camera. But man, the music performances and videos in the movie, and the movie's fun. It's okay, you know. But just and then this album just exploded and was everywhere. Took Becky and we went and saw this movie, and I think I ended up seeing this at the theater probably like 5 or 6 times during this run. Got it on VHS video later on, and just a huge album, and just played it over and over. Got it on vinyl, got it on cassette. I remember us, like I said, driving around in our cars, and just everyone was playing this. All of us were playing this. It was everywhere. I think there's a good argument to be made that probably the biggest event album of all time has got to be Sgt. Pepper by the Beatles, just because, the Beatles were huge with other albums and all, but that was the one that the whole world took notice of, and the mainstream press was writing about, and everybody had an opinion, was hearing it. And even though I was very young, I was 3 or 4 when Pepper came out, I remember my brothers and their friends and my cousin that lived around the corner, them coming home with that album and going into the den to listen to it when it was brand new. And I've heard people talk about, people that were old enough to teenagers or whatever when the Beatles were around, how it was such an event when a Beatles album or single came out, but Sgt. Pepper especially was this huge thing. I think this is probably the second biggest event album ever after Pepper, because there have been other huge albums, Frampton Comes Alive, Rumors by Fleetwood Mac, Grease, Saturday Night Fever soundtrack, Hotel California by the Eagles, obviously Thriller by Michael Jackson. But the difference with those albums is that there were a huge swath of people who loved those albums and bought them, and they sold like hotcakes. But there was also a huge swath of people who were like, really like it. Personally, Rumors and Hotel California are, in my opinion, 2 of the most boring albums ever released. I didn't really care much for Saturday Night Fever one way or another. I liked some of the songs off of Grease, but I never bought the soundtrack, because some of the others wasn't that big on. Thriller, Billie Jean, impeccable. Essential, great song. Thriller, the title song, and Beat It, pretty good songs. The rest of the album, kind of thriller, kind of filler, I guess. I like the earlier Jackson 5 stuff more than Thriller. I liked Off the Wall more than Thriller. And again, Michael Jackson never was as good again after Thriller. He couldn't escape Thriller, everybody knew it. But this one, I mean, the heavy metal kids loved this, the black kids loved it, the Hispanic kids, the white kids, guys loved it, girls loved it. I mean, our parents weren't listening to this, but I mean, everybody knew who Prince was. And, you can argue, a lot of people argue that Sign of the Times is his best album. It's usually between that or this. I think this is his best album. I think Sign of the Times is a great album, but I just think he was never as big commercially or popularity wise after this, and even though he's still big, but the magic of this was never to be recreated, and the wonder of this. And I think that this is not a bad song on here. I used to think The Beautiful Ones was kind of a, chick song or something. I've since grown to love it. Looking at it now, I guess the weakest songs would be I Would Die For You and Baby I'm a Star, but even those are great. There's nothing on this album I would rate below a 9.5, and most everything is a 10. But Let's Go Crazy, The Beautiful Ones, Darling Nikki, and of course the title track, Purple Rain. There's another Matt and Becky song, one of our songs. So got to see Prince in concert, got to see Springsteen in concert that year. I saw I think Prince in 84 and Springsteen's 84 tour carried over into 85, so we saw him in early 85. Saw the Go-Go's in 84, and that was really really just a wonderful thing to get to see these people when they were in their prime and they were young. I mean, Springsteen had been around for a while by the time Born in the USA came around, but Prince was, I think, like 24 when that came out. Madonna was like 24. The Bangles and the Go-Go's were in their 20s when they made these albums. So, like, I got to see the Rolling Stones in 81, Halloween of 81 at the Cotton Bowl. It was great. It was a wonderful memories and great time of that. But they were like close to 40 by then, so they were old men, old men to us because we were 18 or whatever. But getting to see these people when this is brand new and fresh and in their prime was kind of like what it would have been like to have seen the Beatles in 65 or the Rolling Stones in 66 or 69 or something, I guess. So, 1984, just, I'd go back in a second if I could, and things just, not that there was nothing good after, but the things were never as good again, I guess. So, an appreciation in two parts of a year that I dearly loved and dearly missed, and it was a fun time to be alive.